Hello there, I hope you're having a great day, and in this video I'm going to be telling you about my experience, my review, what I think, good and bad, about Trek to Yomi. Now Yomi means Land of the Dead, so the game does get a bit grim. It starts off all nice and hunky-dory, you're in your lovely little village, and then some bandits come and yeah, it all goes a bit Pete Tong. And that's really the setup for the whole story. It's a story of love and duty and revenge. It's a decent little story. I mean, I wouldn't play this game for the story. There aren't any particular characters that I really cared about. The story is serviceable and suits the type of game it is. It doesn't get in the way of the game. The thing that really struck me about this game was the visuals. The black and white visuals reminded me of those old Japanese samurai movies, like the really good ones like Seven Samurai, or my personal favourite, Yojimbo. So if you like those movies and you're looking at this game thinking, yeah, this could be for me, then stick around, because it is actually a really good game and I thoroughly enjoyed it. Yeah, you start off when you're this young lad, and as you can see, the village is burning, it's in ruins, and your sensei, the guy that's sort of guiding you and teaching you, he gets dispatched by this baddie. It's the leader of the bandits, and you get to fight him right at the start. Now, I don't think you can actually beat him at this point, because then the game would be over pretty quickly. Actually, most of the bosses, there's a few bosses in the game, and I dispatched them quite easily. I am playing on normal mode. There's like a hard and easy and normal. This is a normal mode. But there is one boss that gave me a problem, but yeah, I'll let you find out about that for yourselves. I don't want to spoil the story or any major plot points or anything. But as a word of warning, I will be showing footage from later on in the game, so you can see the type of environments, you know, what you're going to get for your money. But it is a beautiful looking game. The amount of detail in the environments is incredible. And you get these cutscenes. They're only short cutscenes just to help, you know, set up the story. Again, they don't get in the way of the action. Now, you do get the sort of glitches on the screen when it's saving and loading sometimes, and I wasn't sure if that was a problem with the game itself or whether or not that was just part of the aesthetic. You know, they wanted to make it look like it's a dodgy old film, and some of the frames are a bit dodgy. Now, you can interact with different parts of the environment. Like here, there's a tree, and you can push it over to make a bridge. There's loads of little elements like that. I wouldn't say that the environments are interactive as such. There's just certain points like there where you can actually interact. It's very obvious when you come across those points. But look at the lighting. It's just superb. I mean, there are games that you can play where they have black and white filters, you know, made in colour, but you can add black and white filters for a film-like effect. But here, the game is built from the ground up for monochromatic to look black and white. This is a nice little section. It kind of reminds me of Sekiro, although obviously you have a fixed camera. It is very film-like. It's almost as if every part of every level is looked at through the lens of a camera, like a director is framing every shot. They even have film grain as well, but you can turn that off. I did turn that off. I don't actually like that. As you can see though, there's a lot of bloom. Again, that makes the image quite soft, so I often turn that off, but I did actually leave it on because it does give a more scenic, like a film-like effect. And you get little bits like this where you get guys that are like, chatting away. It kind of adds to the story. You know, you can just ignore all this if you want, but I used to stop and listen to them. But yeah, the bandits, they're just like... They're a bit one note. The whole game is just telling you how bad the bandits are. Obviously, they want you to really feel like, oh, I've got to kill these guys. They're just so evil. They're dogs. Homeless dogs. But the way the camera tracks the player and moves, pans in and pans out. I mean, some of the camera moves you couldn't really even film. You know, they go above and beyond what you'd see in an actual movie from this time period. But there are little bits of the environment you can interact with, kind of hidden in the background, so it does keep you engaged because you're always like looking to see what you can see. If there's a ladder in the background, you might be able to climb, or if there's a light on somewhere, you think, oh, maybe I can get into that building. Another little cutscene. I mean, they're really nicely done. It is like being in one of these old Japanese movies. It actually made me want to watch Yojimbo again. Now, have you seen any other reviews for this game? You know, I watched quite a lot of reviews when it first came out, which is about a year ago now, so yeah, I kind of took my sweet time getting around to playing this game. But a lot of reviews talked about the combat wasn't the best. And I did play Sekiro recently, and the combat in that is phenomenal. So I wasn't expecting too much from this, to be honest, in terms of the combat. As you can see, the animation is a bit stilted, it is a bit wooden. The characters kind of look like puppets. Definitely looks like it's been keyframed. Obviously, motion capture costs a lot of money. Those motion capture studios cost a lot to hire. This isn't a big budget game. A nice set piece there. That is a thing I loved about this game. Okay, the combat is okay. It's serviceable. But it's really the environments and little hidden bits like this, or you might find a save point. But the environments are just so well constructed. They don't overuse any of the assets. The whole journey, the whole trek, and obviously that's the name of the game, so that's really the focus. This journey, epic journey you're going on. Every location feels unique. You can avoid lots of battles. Like, there's lots of bits like this where if you take a different path, you can actually often avoid fighting lots of enemies. There's even a trophy for doing that. And that's kind of welcome because, as I said, like, the combat isn't the best. It's not terrible, but it does feel a bit clunky. I am playing on the PS4 Pro, so I don't know whether it would be any better on the newer consoles like the PS5. The villagers do moan and groan a lot. They're always complaining. They're always moaning, and sometimes you're like, oh, please stop with the moaning. I know the village is burning, it's all terrible, and how bad the bandits are, but, you know, come on. You can learn new moves. Like, you saw just flash up there, you know, I've just sort of learnt a new move there. You just pick them up as you go through the environments. And that does add a bit to the combat. Another little set piece there. It's so cinematic the whole way through. There's so much of this. There's so many little set pieces like that. And some of it's beautiful. I mean, this reminds me of Bloodborne. There's so much detail here. And I like the way you get little bits of cloth blowing in the wind. The environments do feel alive. So I definitely think this is a game you can play more than once. A lot of people that review this game say, oh, it's a one and done thing. You're unlikely to play through again. Probably because they didn't really gel with the combat. But there's so much detail in the environments that you can't really take it all in first playthrough. The camera angles are so creative, so inventive. A dog there. Lovely little touches like that all the way through the game. There's these shrines here where you can save the game. And there's little bits hidden away. You can easily miss these little areas where there's little collectibles you can pick up. And I picked up some little throwing knives there. This is one of the artifacts, these little collectibles. I don't think they've got any practical use. You just pick them up and you can read about them if you like. I must admit I didn't really read about them. I just, a bit of a completionist, I just like to pick these things up. The use of silhouette here is so nice. It kind of reminds me of Japanese puppet theatre. So I'm actually wondering whether the people that made this game were aiming for that look. It kind of works. Okay, here's a part from the start of the game. And I love the parallax effect they have there. But you can see the trees blowing in the wind. You can really see, when you zoom in, you can see the detail on the bandits, but the animation, you can really see that it looks really puppet-like. So I'm wondering if the animation is actually running like at 25 frames a second or something like that to make it, again, feel like more like stop motion. And whether or not that's affecting the combat and making the combat feel a bit clunky. Because it does feel a bit on the clunky side. So eventually you get down to the underworld. I'm not going to tell you how that happens. Obviously I don't want to spoil that for you. As you can see, you do get a bow you can use. But look at the way this shot has been framed. It's almost like a black and white photograph that someone's taken. Where they thought, that'd be a nice shot. They thought about this all the way through the game. And it's a decent sized game. It's not a short game. It doesn't outstay its welcome. It's a decent size. It actually exceeded my expectations in terms of the amount of content you get. And this is a bit later on. You don't normally get mobbed like this. But you do have a stamina bar at the bottom left there. You can see that if I get a perfect parry, you can get a bit of stamina back. But you do have to be careful. You get a mob like this, you can easily run out of stamina and then you're really vulnerable. And the little squares bottom left, that represents your health. So you can increase your max health by collecting little items in the environment. And you can even stagger enemies, and if you do like an execution move, when you stagger them you can actually get some health back. Although I found that to be really quite hit and miss. I didn't really want to rely on that. But it gets quite dark, this game, like when you get into the underworld. And there are some nice little vistas like this. That kind of reminded me of a Souls game where you'd get up high and then you could overlook things and give you a sense of scale. But you can see the light playing on the water there. So much attention to detail. Again, it's a kind of like supernatural elements to it. Aiko, mate! Matsuno-chan! Yeah, there's definitely a love interest here. And there are different endings to the game. So that does sort of add a bit of replay value. I don't think it changes too much. You can make choices that give you different endings. And there's little puzzle elements here. It's like simple little puzzles. Again, this is later on in the game. And there's all this rubble in the way. And you can sort of turn back time. There's not a lot of these puzzles. But it does look really cool. I love all the particles in the rays of light there. But it does kind of remind me of the old masters, the way they use light, just illuminate just in different areas and leave everything else in shadow and silhouette. That's the thing about this game, because it's been made as a black and white game from the ground up. They don't have to worry about colour, but they can't use colour. So everything has to be done as contrast. And they really push it. Like here, it really gives you that sense it's all supernatural. Again, this kind of reminds me of like a Souls game. I wouldn't say it's a Souls-like. You know, you can't level up in this game, and this game is completely linear, really. There are a few little hidden paths, but it's just a linear experience.
What fresh nightmare awaits me in here?
Now, you heard a bit of the English voice acting there, but I quickly switched it back to Japanese. Because I just felt the Japanese voice acting just sounded so much better. It's good that they got the English voice acting for people that want it, but I just found it took me straight out of the experience. Now, see, if stamina's really low, you definitely need to just sort of hold back, get your stamina back. But when you get into the underworld, you're fighting all these enemies that you fought before, but they're all kind of supernatural versions. Again, I've unlocked some other moves there. I didn't really use a lot of these moves, I only used like a handful of them that I found to be effective. Like the heavy attack is good for enemies like that one that I've armoured. So it's just really about finding out what attack works best for which enemy. That guy was annoying, he just throws projectiles at you. But this guy with a hat, he actually teleports behind you. And if you're staggered at the time and he teleports behind you, you can't get away. That's a bit frustrating. There were times playing this game where I did get a bit frustrated. It wasn't the bosses, it was when you just get mobbed by too many enemies and they're throwing projectiles at you and teleporting around behind you, and you can't get away from them to get your health or you get your stamina back. You can't really get your health back. There are little pots that you can crack, you get a little bit of health, but you hardly ever see them. So you really only get your health back when you get to a shrine where you can save it. And when the camera flips, it's like that. Sometimes you don't know which way to press the stick and you end up going back the wrong way. But any game that has a fixed camera, that can always be a problem, I think. But again, you can see somewhere in the distance there that you can actually get around to. Again, that reminds me of Dark Souls. Again, a nice little bit of camera work there. And the development studio working on this game have definitely been inspired by these old movies, even the way they were filmed. There is a strong depth of field effect that I'm not normally a fan of that, because it kind of makes things a bit blurred, and I like everything to be sharp so I can look at what I want to look at. But here you can see that the depth of field is actually tied to the player character, so he's in focus all the time. So as I move towards this opening here, that goes into focus as well. These old Japanese films used a lot of depth of field effects, and it works. Like, normally I'm not a fan, but in this game, because it is, you know, all about those old movies, sort of recreating one as a game, it works. Now, I wouldn't say this game is difficult. If you've played something like Sekiro or Bloodborne, this is not like that. Like, this is not going to challenge you in the same way. This is a bit from later on in the game, and there's quite a lot of enemies. Normally there's only like 2 or 3. But I think this is like the last chapter. I think there's 7 chapters, and I think this is like the last one. And they do throw more at you, and also the shrines are further apart. Like early on in the game, for the bulk of the game, the shrines are really close together, so you never really lose much progress even if you do die. But on the last chapter, I'd noticed that they started spacing the shrines out, the save points, a lot further apart. So if you weren't careful, if you weren't paying attention, you could quite easily get punished, and then you might be like nearly to the next shrine and you're like, oh no, I've got to go through all those enemies again. So there were a few times that I did get a bit frustrated with the game, but it was only later on. But definitely pump up the difficulty at the end. But I don't mind the challenge. I enjoyed it. I think the first part of the game was a bit too easy. So it's all about the parry really in this game. Kind of like Sekiro. In Sekiro you'd get a glint, you see a glint on the sword, and that's when you would know to do the parry. And it's the same here, so you're looking for that glint. But the timing did seem a bit off. A lot of other reviewers were saying about the parry timing being off. I do agree with that. You get used to it. So I used the cannon there. That takes a long time to reload, but you can kill multiple enemies with that cannon with one shot. I think there's even a trophy for that. It's another one of the little puzzles here. But I won't show you that. Okay. So yeah, you can see that the game gets a bit dark. Like literally. And you have this glowing light following you around. I don't even really know what that's about, to be honest. I didn't really follow the story that closely. As I say, it's not really the story that drives you forward. This game kept calling me back to it because of the visuals, because of the way it looked, and I just wanted to see what was next, and it constantly surprised me and surpassed my expectations. It really did. I was actually quite shocked how much work is in this game. I think on Amazon you can get like a new copy for £25 at the moment, and I think it's definitely worth that. Like, if you're looking at this thinking, that's a beautiful game, and you don't expect too much from the combat, you can have a really good time with this game. I actually finished this one. I don't finish a lot of games. So if I finish a game, it normally means it's pretty decent. So these ladies here, they summon other enemies, so you definitely want to deal with them quickly. But there's a nice bit of verticality here as well. You don't feel like it's all just like flat, open areas. And it does add a nice bit of variety when the camera zooms right out. You know, this tiny little character making your way through this environment. And sometimes it will zoom right in. And then you can see all the detail in the models. So the game kept my interest the whole way through in terms of the aesthetic of the art direction, the lighting, the texturing work, all the modelling work. And the audio as well is top notch. Like, I have to say, I was blown away. The audio is just spot on. Like that skull in the background there. I don't know what they're using for that, so ZBrush or Mudbox or even maybe Blender. Cause it wasn't too. It was quite basic, so you could definitely use Blender for that. But later on, the set pieces do get grander, and the architecture gets a bit bigger in scale. So they're definitely up the ante towards the end. I like the way you can reverse time there. You kind of get like that sense of eons have passed. You know, this place is falling to pieces. And there are certain parts of the game, like this part of the game, that reminded me of what's the game by Onimusha? That's it, the game by Capcom, Onimusha. This reminds me of that, especially because it's got the fixed camera angles. The first two games in that series had fixed cameras as well. And this part of the game made me feel a bit woozy. So I thought I'd show this stuff because I wanted to show the amount of variety there is in the different levels. Because a lot of reviews don't really show this. I never actually bought the game when it first came out because they said, oh, the combat's not great. I thought, okay, well, I'll leave it. I'll pick it up in a sale. I kind of wish I hadn't now, because I wish I'd bought it straight away, because I really enjoyed it. And I love the way the camera kind of floats around here. So later on, it definitely feels a bit more otherworldly. Almost like you're kind of... It's so surreal. You're kind of just sort of watching yourself in these environments. Almost kind of voyeuristic. It's like you're watching yourself, like peeking through a crack in a fence or something, and like watching your little player character run around. But the dynamic lighting is really nice as well. So you've got all this dynamic lighting, you've got the depth of field effect. I mean, the light and dark here, it's used so well. Definitely reminds me of sort of like a Caravaggio painting or a Rembrandt, where they use light and dark so effectively. But I love the way everything feels alive here. The whole environment's animated. Really feels supernatural. And you've got these kind of undead enemies here, like kind of zombie-like. Now, some reviewers were complaining about a lack of variety in the enemies and how you fight them. And I sort of agree with that. These guys that headbutt you, they're a real pain. You definitely need your heavy attack for those. But I don't. There's a lot of different enemies. I didn't feel like they were overused too much. You know, obviously you always want more if you can get more. But considering this isn't like a AAA title, this is by a smaller studio, I think they've done an amazing job. I just feel like if the combat was just a bit more refined, a bit more responsive, if they tweak the timings a bit, when you do a parry, it does feel kind of sluggish, like slow to pull the sword out. And yeah, I just wanted it to be a bit more snappy, the parry. It's like if you miss the timing, you get punished. Yeah, some of the interiors, again, they're really nicely done. You're quite zoomed in. So you've got those areas where you're zoomed right out, and then you get these zoomed in areas like this. And they really do look like puppets to me. But I don't. It's kind of quaint. It kind of fits with the art style here. What they're trying to do, it just works. So I enjoyed playing this game like small doses. I'd come on in the evening. I'd be like, oh yeah, actually I fancy just seeing what's next. Play an hour or so. So I wasn't playing it for like hours and hours, because I think maybe the combat might get a bit stale then. But if you just play it in little manageable chunks, then it's really enjoyable. Well, I really enjoyed it anyway. I like the way the arrows burn those panels. I got kicked then. Now there is a pass-through move you can do. So when you do a parry, if you push towards the enemy, you can actually move past them. So that's a good way of getting, if you're pinned in a corner, getting out of trouble. And there's even a move where as you can like push towards the enemy and parry, and then give them a hit or two as you pass. But the timing is difficult though. It's a nice scene. There's a lot of fire, lots of stuff fire in this game. Okay, so yeah, I think it's a great game. I really enjoyed it. The combat is, it is probably the weakest part of the game. And I think if the combat was a bit better, then this game would be considered a classic. Because visually it's stunning. So there you go. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.